roll call, please. We have 4 of 5 present. Again, Tiffany Boyd Hodgson is at a graduation this evening. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
No, we do not.
We do not. Thank you for this cheat sheet. When to read. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting of June 5th, 2024?
Move to approve.
Motion by Director Hernandez,
Second.
second by Director Elethar. Please vote. Voting is unanimous. Do we have any public speakers?
No public speakers, sir.
No public speakers. We do have a presentation. General Manager Gumpel, I understand we are presenting scholarships to 3 of 4 students, winners of the district's 2024 scholarship contest.
That's correct. As the board's aware that we have an annual scholarship contest, and this year we actually doubled the amount from 1,000 to 2,000. We selected 4 scholarship award winners through the P3 committee, and this was brought to the board for consideration and award. 3 of the 4 are here with us today. The 4th is actually graduating right now and could not be with us. And so I'll turn it over to Chris Robbins to make the introductions.
Thank you, General Manager. So just as what General Manager pointed out, board members, tonight we have 3 of our winners here tonight. President Tiffany Boyd Hodgson actually gave the scholarship at an award ceremony at the high school a week ago. So he did get his check already. That student is Lucas Garcia, so he already got his check. He's already probably been able to cash it and had some fun. Tonight we have with us 3 of the students. Lucas was from San Marcos High School, and we have 2 from Palomar and 1 from Cal State San Marcos. Our first candidate is Logan Crawford, who actually led us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening, and Logan worked with us as an intern during the spring semester. Logan is a great intern. He's like a son to me. I really enjoyed having him here. I'm hoping he gets hired here. Logan, congratulations. Logan Crawford.
Hey!
Hey! Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I just want to thank you guys for the opportunity. It's definitely going to go towards school, furthering my education. I still have about 5 or 6 more water classes at Palomar to take, and trying to get that associate's degree and come work here. And yeah, just thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So, and our next candidate is actually a son to me, not like a son to me, is Riley Robbins from Cal State University, San Marcos. Riley Robbins.
Dud. Hope those fire sprinklers don't go off.
Much appreciated, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited for my future in education and pursuing computer science. It's going to be amazing. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Riley.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want Riley to be one of the IT guys here, like Jonathan on the end. And finally, we have Eric Gonzalez, and what's exciting is Eric is going to be the fall intern in 2024 here at Vallecitos. So another intern from Palomar. Eric, come on up. Eric Gonzalez. Let's get you the check for you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. Good evening, guys. My name is Eric Gonzalez. First and foremost, I would like to thank God for giving me the opportunity to accept this beautiful award, and this scholarship. I would just like to say that I'm very grateful and thankful for being here and being chosen to receive this scholarship. It has been an answer to my prayers as a single father of 3 daughters who is just looking who's just looking to better my life and further my career in the field of water technology while raising my 3 daughters. This money will be very useful and helpful with my daughter's soccer dreams, helping them pay for their team tuitions and also pay for my books and studies for the fall semester. I'm in my last semester of water technology. I have taken 7 courses, and I have 3 to go. I would like to give a special thank you to Vallecitos Water District, its board of directors, and also to Chris Robbins, who I've been speaking to often. And also to Mr. Jacob Shiva, my professor at Palomar College. Without him, I don't think I would have made it through his great advice and also his tutoring sessions. To my family and kids, I'd like to thank you for being my support system and for always believing in me. I'm excited for the future and looking forward to my fall internship here at Vallecitos as well. Once again, thank you to all who made this possible. Have a good evening and God bless.
Thank you.
So Jacob Sheba actually was going to try and come to it. He's the facilitator over at Palomar, but he was on an interview panel. He wasn't quite sure if he was going to make it here or not. I don't see him. But I still want to get a picture with the big check and the board and the winners that we have here. So if you can come down in the bullpen. Is what they call it? I don't know. Am I wrong?
That's what Chris calls it.
Okay, you get to be in the middle. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Okay, so we've got 3 and then 4, so board members in the windows. Oh, well, you know what? Let me get a photo and then we'll have Jacob Sheba. So I need the board members in the windows, so up and in the gap. And you guys can scoot apart a little bit. He's gonna be in this gap between you two. And then, there you go.
There you go. You should be in it. You want to switch this time? Because you can go by your son.
That's all right. I got enough switches with him. And 1, 2, 3, and grin. And 1, 2, 3, and grin. Anybody else want this photo? Mom?
I'll take it from your phone.
Okay, but Mom,
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
you good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
All right.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Oh, so, but Jacob Sheba is here, and I'd like to invite Jacob Sheba up. These are a couple of his students, and then he has been partnering with me on the internships.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm running late. Came out of interviews for our new dean at the college literally at 5 o'clock, so I got here as soon as I could. But I wanted to reiterate my support for this program, for the scholarship program, to the board, but your just support for overall workforce development and education. So just for those of you who don't know me, I'm the full-time faculty member and program coordinator for Palomar College's water technology program. Rounding out 5 years over there at the college, and have really developed a wonderful working relationship with Vallecitos. I work with Chris a lot, not only on helping to promote, say, the scholarship program, but the internship program, which our current intern is here right now, and our next intern is right there. We've had 5 interns now go through that program. There we go. So I want to reiterate my support for you as a board, you as a company as a whole, allocating your time, limited resources to help foster that relationship and develop those so that we can help foster our next generation of workforce. So water can continue to flow, we can continue to collect and treat wastewater, and live society, normally as we do. So thank you all for your continued support.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for coming so much. And students, you are welcome to stay for this board meeting, but you're also welcome to duck out as soon as you're ready. Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to all. Appreciate that. And I'm glad the fire sprinklers didn't go off after those fireworks.
Yeah.
Presentation, consent items. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar, or does a board member wish to pull any? Motion to approve consent?
So moved.
Second. Approve, motion by Director Ellertharp, second by Director Hernandez. Please vote. Motion passes. Moving on to action items. We've got a few of them tonight. It's gonna go really quick, though, I have a feeling. Action item number 2.1, water supply update. Yeah, we haven't had one of these for a while.
Yeah, I think they come out quarterly, but this is the water supply update, and while I'll do a little dancing while Chris gets his stuff ready here, but I'm gonna keep my portions pretty brief as possible, because we do have a long agenda tonight. So, basically, this is the water supply update for June, which will supply the water year update for what we saw both in Colorado and the Sierra Nevada system. And now that Chris is ready, I'll hand it over.
Thank you, General Manager. So the Board of Directors had rescinded drought level 2 back on June 10th of 2023 and had declared a drought level 1 drought watch effective on the same date. I have good news, back-to-back wet winters have been a major boost to the state's water supplies and reservoirs. The 2023 year was the 8th wettest in the past 5 decades. So that's telling you we were really getting some good precipitation. The precipitation map is a little different than what I had when I was working on the board report. So I make the board report a week before, but I went and got the latest info today. So you can see the precipitation map still looks very impressive. Snowiest day of the year of the whole season was on May 5th. I think this is up at Heavenly Valley up in Tahoe, and the snowiest day was in May, which is rather unusual. So a lot of the water conditions are improving. Here's Lake Oroville, December of 2022. You can see how empty it is, and then April of 2024. So just another example of the improving conditions that we're getting. California reservoir storage, Oroville, it's at 100%. Shasta, which is the biggest one we have, at 94%. In your board report, there's a mention of San Luis, and it was higher in the report I gave you, and then I looked at it today and it had gone down a little bit, which means the state's moving water around. They're moving water in preparation for additional loss of snowpack and melting. As of June 30th, on the Colorado River, Lake Mead at 34%, Lake Powell at 37%. So those not really fantastic numbers, but the state itself is in really good shape. 3-month temperature outlook looks like it's going to be higher than normal projected for San Diego County, and precipitation, it says equal chances for the next 3 months. So based on 2 back-to-back wet winters in the state of California, I recommend, or staff recommends, that the Vallecitos Water District rescind drought level 1 drought watch status, and I will take questions.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that report. Any questions?
One keen observation, you had a photo of December 2022. Just would like to point out that's when I joined the board, and it's no coincidence that we've had a wonderful 2 years here. So. That is all.
Very nice.
Director Grosset, I love that. Truly.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Well, Director Gross, thank you for filling the reservoirs. Appreciate it.
Stick around.
Any other observations or comments or questions? Any motion, any public speakers?
No, sir.
Motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Seconded.
Director Hernandez moves to approve, and seconded by Director Grosset. Vote. And it passes 4-0. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Chris.
Thank you.
Did you have a doubt?
No.
Thank you so much. Moving on, action item 2.2. Construction contract award for the update restrooms to ADA compliance project. And we'll hand this over to,
Yeah, Eric will end up taking this item, but just as a brief intro, a reminder, this item has been in front of the board and committee, engineering committee twice and the board once. Originally, it was a full bathroom remodel with also ADA compliance upgrades. Then after board comments, we went back to see basically what a ADA compliance update would cost. Staff came to engineering committee, gave a few different options. Committee provided direction to move forward with an option for ADA compliance only. Staff went out and got bids on that. And now we're coming back to the board and with the presentation, looking at two different options, which is an ADA compliance only option or what I would call the do nothing option. With that, Eric will provide additional details.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, General Manager. As General Manager just said, I am here once again to discuss the ADA
We like
lobby
seeing you.
restrooms, once again.
It's always good seeing you.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. There we go. Okay. All right, we'll begin with a brief project overview and then dive into the updates for both the men's and the women's restrooms. Then we'll review the contractor's quote and the project's budget. And after that, we will discuss our options to proceed and staff recommendations. Lastly, we will open up for questions and discussion. All right, as you may recall, this project was initiated in fiscal year 2019-2020 and subsequently delayed due to the pandemic and needed project prioritization in that year. In fiscal year 2022-23, the project was restarted and staff contracted with MBM Group to perform design services for remodeling and bringing the restrooms into ADA compliance. Design was completed in October of 2023 and put out to bid in December of that year. Bids were opened in January of 2024 with the winning bid from EMH Construction presented for approval at the March 6th board meeting. At that time, there were outstanding questions and the board of directors asked staff to investigate alternative options and bring them forward when ready. Since then, staff has worked with our architect, our contractor, to produce alternative cost-effective measures, or cost-effective options, I should say, foregoing the full remodel and solely focusing on bringing the restrooms into ADA compliance. These options were then presented to the Engineering Equipment Committee on April 11th, 2024, at which point staff was directed to pursue the alternative design option and get a quote from EMH Construction. On May 28th, the revised scope and quote were brought to the Engineering and Equipment Committee, as well as a do-nothing option. Staff recommended proceeding with the revised scope and received support from the Engineering and Equipment Committee, which brings us here today. With that, we'll dive into the revised scope for both the men's and the women's restrooms. And I will preface it, the work for both restrooms is nearly identical, minus one little thing. And so I'm gonna talk to the men's restroom only. And if you have any questions on the women's restroom, we can get back to that and just let me know. Okay, so some of the work that will be, the highlights that the contractor will be doing will be relocating the counter and the mirror and sink above 34 inches above the floor. They will relocate the partition, 60 inches clear of the tile wall. In the men's room, they will relocate the urinal to the center of the alcove after adjusting that partition. Relocate the door frame with the entrance door frame to the restroom 60 inches clear from the opposite wall. And then they will install a marble threshold and reframe the old opening. And where the new door frame will go, they will install a new metal stud wall and new wall tile in the alcove. And there's the women's. As mentioned previously, we worked with EMH Construction, who were the original bid winners, to get the quote for this revised scope. To perform the work described on the previous slides, EMH quoted a total of $68,400, which is almost half of the original quote for the original bid. The budget for this project is listed in the capital budget and has a budget of $191,000 with EMH's reduced scope and reduced quote of $68,400, which reduced the contingency, that 10%, to $6,840, and MBN's design services, as well as staff and overhead, as well as construction phase consulting services. The total budget for this project has reduced to $138,000, $138,916, which would leave the project with a surplus of $52,084. So our options for this project moving forward are contracting with EMH Construction in the amount of $68,400 to perform the ADA accommodations, which we described earlier. Or, as mentioned by the general manager, we could put the project on hold or cancel it and address it sometime in the future. With that, staff and the Engineering Equipment Committee recommend to authorize the general manager to execute a construction contract with EMH Construction in the amount of $68,400, subject to provisions of the contract. And with that, I'll open it up for questions and discussion.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm guessing you'll be happy when we're done talking about bathrooms.
Very much so.
I was wondering. Question?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm the one that went out there. I've measured everything up. I've conferred with my ADA specialist in my office. I've been doing this for 50 years. I did notice that the metal partition is about 1 inch short of the 60 inches. But to spend, first, the 68 double because of staff time and everything else is just obscene. You know what they say, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, and I don't think it's broken. So I would move that we eliminate the project forever.
Okay. Any other questions?
I think I missed the initial discussion about this. So does this current bathroom not meet the standard?
The metal partition in the bathroom is 1 inch short. It's supposed to be 60 inches, it's 59 inches. But I don't believe that we're ever gonna be snagged. We haven't been snagged for 20 plus years, and it was approved initially. So I don't, and that's the only thing that's wrong. We don't need to move walls. We've got the 60-foot diameter in
Recording
front
in
of it.
progress.
Hello?
Still recording.
Oh, okay. We have the 60-inch diameter in front of the sinks in both cases. The wall, the little bit of a hall that goes down there is larger than 44 inches, which is the rule, so that a handicapped person can get in there and make the turn, do a turnaround if they need to, get into the handicap stall. So I don't believe the expenditure of $130,000+ for 1 inch is the right thing for our ratepayers to be paying.
Eric, go back a couple slides.
So there were three, let me go back here.
To the cost summary.
Okay. So there were 3 violations that our architect noted on it. They were the sink and counter height, the pole door clearance at the restroom entrance, and the accessible toilet partition, as Director Hernandez pointed out. When I looked it up, according to the California Building Code, the max height for the counter and the sink is measured at 34 inches. We're supposed to be at the top 34 inches, and that is measured at either the counter or the sink, whichever is higher. Right now, the counter is at 34, but the sink's about 3/4 of an inch higher. So that would mean it would need to come down along with readjusting the mirror down. And then according to the California Building Code, the clearance for the pole door is supposed to be 60 inches, and right now that's 58. And then oh, I thought you were going to say something. And then, of course, the partition that Director Hernandez just described.
Just for clarification for the board, so if we go with the do-nothing option, Eric, please correct me here, the expenses that have already been spent to date, $31,902 has already been spent to date, correct? So really the savings that would be is the 19,700 and portions of the 12,000?
Correct.
And of course, the 68,000 plus. So just to go down in order, the first item, the construction obviously would be a savings with the do-nothing option. The contingency is just a contingency per our ordinance, so that would be a savings. and a portion of the last two items above the total line would be a saving, because that's just staff time during construction. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the remaining money would be spent to date. So in other words, total expenses for this project would be probably in the neighborhood of 40 to 45,000 spent to date is what I'm guessing. So that's what you're looking at. The difference is 138 or call it 45.
Okay. You got clarification? Yeah.
Yeah, what Director Hernandez mentioned, it doesn't seem to be in his mind, doesn't seem to be out of compliance. It's clearly out of compliance in my mind. There's at least 3 measurements that are off. He indicates we haven't been, quote, snagged on this, but others have been snagged to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. So I don't want to risk getting a lawsuit over this. I think it's money well spent to fix it. Thanks.
I have another question.
Yeah, Director Grosset, did you have a comment? Okay, yeah.
There were 3 things. The partition, you said that I didn't get about the threshold or the doorway. What's
So there were the sink and counter height.
the counter height? Yes.
Mhm. Then the pole door clearance to the restroom entrance, the current setup that it is right now, there's only 58 inches between the alcove that door is set in. So the wall and then the alcove is only 58 inches.
Right, 58 inches, but you only need 44.
It's supposed to be 60.
No, it's a corridor. Corridors are 44. The area in front of the sink needs to be 60, and it is 60. But the little corridor that goes down there only needs to be 44 inches. It's not a, you know, or else all of our halls would be 60 inches, and that's not the case. 44 inches is the rule, 60-inch diameter, and 60-inch diameter in front of the sinks is there, and it's right. Move the partition over an inch, and Bob's your uncle.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? I mean, my comment is, I'm stuck between these 2 guys, literally. I don't want to spend the money either. However, I don't want to be sued. And I think for $68K, just to clear any possible violations. I mean, I have I'm not going to call him a close friend because he's an attorney. But I have a friend who's an attorney, and that's what they do. They go to ballparks around the nation, and all they do is they send out these young guys, and they test tensions on doors, they take pictures, they measure things, and then they put in a lawsuit and say, hey, you don't have to fix this, but here's a bill. If you don't want to fix it, we're not going to sue you. And I just think for $68,000, it would be nice just to be compliant with the opportunity. I know we haven't been snagged, but it's just the longer it goes, I'm just concerned about lawsuits. So,
Well,
yes,
it's
I don't want to spend the money either.
It's really not 68, it's 138.
I know, but we've already spent 40.
Well, yeah, okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's not, well, that's my concern, is just a lawsuit. I agree with you. I don't want to spend the money, but I don't want to be sued either. So I'm guessing 68,000 to not be sued might be money well spent. So there's my concern. I don't know. Any other comments? And before we take it to a vote?
I'll ask for Mr. Gilpin's wise counsel here as an opinion.
Relative to, I have not reviewed this relative to the ADA compliance. I mean, I'm assuming you paid an architect $30,000 to look at this, and I'd hope they knew what the heck they were talking about. You know, there is a risk, and, you know, the ADA suits have diminished, not to the, they aren't being filed to the extent they were when the ADA Act was enacted, but there's still the risk there, so.
So therein lies the question. Any other comments before we?
Well, I'm just
Or do we have a
curious,
motion?
I guess, if you're aware of what is the qualifier of those risks, is it the actual measurement down to 3/4 of an inch or whatever the sink is higher in Eric's case? Or is it, you know, these were developed with ADA in mind? It's clear that the spirit of that bathroom is made large enough for a wheelchair and to accommodate everything. It's just the sink was built like 3/4 of an inch above, and the one out thing is 1 inch further. Is there like a clear, some form of
Again, I have not looked at this for enforcement compliance with respect to the purported violations. I'd be happy to do it if you want to table this for 2 weeks. And I'll come back and give you the word from our ADA people relative to, you know, that risk of compliance. I mean, my gut reaction is you're talking about minuscule stuff here. You're talking about 1 inch on the partition, and then the counter height actually is correct, but you've got a floating sink instead of an undermounted sink, which has taken it out of compliance, so.
It is
I can't opine relative to it, but I'm happy to do so if that's what you want to look at.
thank you.
thanks.
Any other comments? Yep.
I would like to table this and have you look at it, because if the 1 inch differential, if we can just move that partition over an inch, the counter height, I don't think is an issue, and I'm sure about this hall issue. I'm absolutely sure of it. But if we could table it and have our attorney look it over, I mean, I've been wrong in the past, so.
And there's a good point here, because the counter height and the sink, not that the counter height and the partitions are the easy fix.
Yeah.
When in my one conversation with a different architect, they are saying that Director Hernandez is right for a hallway or a doorway going through, but because there's a 90-degree turn coming into the bathroom, that triggers the 60 inches. And that was just based on a quick conversation at a meeting, but it wasn't like they're professional, they didn't look at it. I just asked them that question because my understanding is the same as Director Hernandez. For a doorway going through a hallway, it's 44 inches. But as soon as you create a 90-degree turn, then the wheelchair would have to make that turn. That triggers the 60 inches, and we have 58. That portion of the work creates the lion's share of the cost. So that's really what this comes down to, because the rest of the work in the ADA is pretty darn simple, as Director Hernandez alluded to. But that portion of the work and that definition is really what this comes down to.
Well, that piece should be easily verified on review. I mean, that's not a risk assessment, that's a compliance assessment.
Yeah. Currently, that's what we're getting from our architect.
Well, thank you for the presentation comments. So basically, the item on the table is do nothing or approve the contract, which is recommended by the committee at $68,000, correct?
Correct.
Do we have a
Or
motion?
table it.
Or table it. So do we have a motion to approve as recommended by staff? No motion. Do we have a motion to do nothing? It sounds like, do we have a motion to table it?
Table it. I move to table the
Moved.
item for attorney review.
Move to,
Second.
okay. We have a motion by Director Hernandez to table it and for attorney review, and a seconded by Director Elitharp to do the same. Vote. Okay, so motion to look into it a little further, contrary to what Eric wants. Thank you for your comments. I know it's not a lot, but it is ratepayer money, and we're trying to be fiduciaries. Thank you, Eric. Sorry, it'll be put to bed soon.
Vice President Panic, third time to the board will be a charm.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, action item 2.3, which has changed a little bit than what it shows in your agenda here, reads, award a professional services agreement for design engineering services for the land outfall parallel sewer section A project, not a reallocation, as it shows in the agenda, correct?
That's correct. So, with this, though, as the board's aware, one of our largest pipes, as far as from the sewer system, is the pipe we call the land outfall. It carries sewer from our district all the way to Encina, the treatment plant. Obviously, what we call the western portion is owned, there's a 3-agency capacity agreement with Vallecitos being the owner, but the eastern portion is 100% Vallecitos. And I don't want to take too much of Jason's presentation away, so I'll hand it over now.
All right, thank you, General Manager Gumpel. Good evening, Vice President Pinnock, members of the board, and I want to thank Eric for getting the most difficult topics out of the way. So this will be very easy. So tonight for your consideration is award of a professional services agreement for the design of the land outfall parallel sewer Section A project. And as you know, in engineering, we like long project names, so that's a thing we like to continue. This item begins on page 53 of your board packet. Now, normally, Senior Engineer Ryan Morgan would be giving you this presentation, but like many parents of small-aged children, he is away at a promotion ceremony for his son, so he's not with us tonight, so you're stuck with me. Apologize in advance. But I do have some support from the crowd, so. I know we've discussed the land outfall many times before, so we're not going to get through the history and details. So I'm going to skip that, but if you do have any questions, please stop me and we can get into it. You may recall the land outfall was installed in 1986. Like the general manager said, it begins at Lift Station 1 along San Marcos Boulevard. It extends west all the way to the Encina Water Pollution Control Facility located in Carlsbad, just west of I-5. You got the graphic on the screen there. That's on page 57 of your board packet. And you can see that the land outfall is broken into 4 sections. We call it A, B, C, and D. That western portion, which is B, C, and D, is 100% owned and operated by Vallecitos Water District, but we do have shared capacity with the city of Carlsbad and Buena Sanitation. So when we're doing anything in that reach, there are some shared coordination and costs. That section, the dividing line is west of El Camino Real. We did perform a condition assessment of this portion in 2001, and Eric and I are working on a phased approach to do some cleaning and repairs and rehab for that section, coordinating with those agencies, and that's going to be happening over time. Not part of this action, but just want to give you just sort of some context of what's going on the general outfall as it is. The eastern portion, which is Section A, you can see there in the green and yellow, that's east of El Camino Real. That is 100% Vallecitos. There are no shared capacity, so we do bear the full burden costs for anything occurring in this portion. Now, this eastern portion, Section A, is over capacity, and we have, it's over capacity for peak weather events. And I just want to show you a graphic of what that looks like under a peak weather event. So we have experienced 218,000 gallons of sewer spilled, discharged into the environment at this location over the last 5 years. And this is what's really driving the priority of this project. This project has been on the books since 2008. But like I said, really, these recent events have made the project a priority. From a risk perspective, when you look at Section 8, there are some newer PVC sections that were replaced in 2006, and they score in the 4s, if you can remember those heat maps. But there are some older ductile iron sections that are located in environmentally sensitive areas, and they score in the 17s. So out of a max score of 25, if you look at the total Section A, we're about 11.3 on the risk scoring. Regardless of that, there's no doubt that the land outfall, and particularly Section A, is a critical asset as part of our wastewater portfolio. And because of that, you may recall last summer we did bring on GEI as a program manager for this project, and I have Ms. McDaniels in the audience from GEI, and they can certainly answer any questions that you have. The board did award a 2-year contract with GEI in the amount of $905,000. We're about 25% billed out. We're about 38% through their contract. So from a budget perspective, we're doing really well. And from a services perspective, we're very happy with the services they provided and continue to provide to us on this project. So after that award, we did get with them and we defined what the scope of this project was, and that's kind of what you're seeing on the screen. The scope is to deliver a preliminary design report for the entire outfall, which is a 10% design, including a 30% design on the Section A, which is really our critical area, and then moving on to final design and bid documents to actually upgrade or replace and upgrade that yellow piece that you see, and that's a gravity piece of Section A. And then that green section that you see, the design will be to build a parallel pressurized siphon, which is what that green line is that you see. So that's going to be the final end product of this project. Since that project scope was developed, we did advertise an RFP in January. By the way, advertising that RFP was a tactical plan initiative for the engineering department for this fiscal year, so I'm happy that we achieved that milestone. However, we don't just hit those milestones, we keep going. So that RFP, we did have about 12 interested firms. We did receive 4 proposals, which is still a really good number for a project of this size and complexity. We did put a review panel together, and that included engineering, operations, GEI, and a representative from the city of Carlsbad. So that team reviewed those proposals. From those proposals, we did select the top 2 firms, and then we moved on to interviews, which were conducted in April. And from there, the panel did unanimously select Dudek as the most qualified and responsive firm. Dudek is represented here tonight. Mr. Mike Metz from Dudek is in the audience, and certainly if you have any questions on their scope or anything, I'm sure he's willing to get to the podium, but I'm hoping not to. But he's here to back me up. GEI and our staff did negotiate with Dudek a time and material not to exceed fee of $3,138,096 for their services. Their scope is outlined on page 55 of your board packet. We expect this preliminary design report and final design to take about 2 or 3 years to complete. Award of this professional services agreement was brought to the Engineering and Equipment Committee last week, and they did support bringing this to the full board for consideration. So I thank the committee for their time. When we're looking at the fiscal impact of this project, we do have budgeted $11.3 million. We've expended about $250,000 of that budget, which is on target for what we allocated for this fiscal year, by the way. Not part of this action, but just to make you aware, that total project budget will significantly increase, as was discussed with both finance and engineering equipment. And that's really to tackle the construction phase of this project, which is several years out, but we're doing some long-range planning. And as we get closer to that, we will be working very closely with Dudek to get a more accurate, detailed construction estimate. And we'll be working with Wes and his team as far as scheduling options, financing options as how we tackle that. But again, that's several years out. I do want to mention that before I get to the recommendation, which is listed on page 56, there's just a couple of clarification. We did have a typo, and so there's a comma where there should be a decimal. So we are looking to award a contract of $3 million, not $3,000. So I would love to get Dudek on the hook for $3,000, but I don't think they'd be good with that. So there's also, like you mentioned, there is a change, and we are not looking for a reallocation of future funds. So I got together with Wes and just had some clarification. I thought there was some accounting housekeeping, but because this project and the spending of this professional services agreement, it is in alignment with the budget that you will be considering here and the next item. So there is no question about how that's going to be allocated. So I want to be clear on that. And with that, staff does recommend to the board to authorize the general manager to execute a professional services agreement with Dudek for engineering services in the amount of $3,138,096 for the land outfall parallel sewer section A project. And I can answer any questions you have.
Jason, I prefer the number that's in the staff
Oh,
report.
I do too. Agreed.
Thank you, Jason, appreciate it. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, I've got kind of an unrelated question, but how were the flows handled prior to 1986, prior to the land outfall?
Oh, where did the flows go? What happened? Yeah, that's a good question. My understanding is that those flows were sent to Meadowlark. As you know, the Meadowlark's been around since 50s, 60s. Yeah, and that was treated to secondary, and that's sort of been lost in time since the outfall. As you know, it was only built in the 80s. So what happened to that flow prior to that? I'm not sure I should comment in a public forum, but
guess
it's
I
sort, let's
stumped-
just say it's
I stumped
been
you on that.
lost in time.
Okay, thanks.
Any question?
Yeah, if we can you come on up and chat real quick? Yeah, please, yeah.
Who do you want, GEI or Dudek? Or
Oh,
both?
no, I've already gone through the GEI.
Okay.
So, yeah, it sounds like you have been selected for this job.
Thank you
Or
very much.
recommended. And I would just love for you to just walk us through what $3 million buys the public.
It's a very long and complicated project. We're going to be looking at multiple, first we're going to be looking at the existing pipe to see what condition it's in. As we talked about, we're looking to rehab, if we can, a portion of that system or that part of the system, and then do a parallel. That parallel pipeline, we're proposing to be a trenchless over a large portion of it, if we can, to do a trenchless technology so that we're not in disrupting the local area, the environmental components of the project. That in of itself is a big part of the project, the environmental component, because it does generally follow an existing easement in a lot of areas. So from that standpoint, we're going to be dealing with that. There's a public component to this that we need to make sure that we're keeping everybody up to date on what's going on. So yes, as a general overall project, has a lot of components. It's nothing we haven't done before. I personally worked on a 15.5-mile long pipeline, and the project manager we have for this project, Kate Palmer, recently completed a CVWD project that was quite a bit longer than this and a little bit bigger in size. So we're prepared to do it, and that's what it is. It is a good project, and we're certainly very happy that you guys selected us, and that's what it buys you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just add that there's, this project, as you can see, that green portion is a big part of the project, and that's a pressurized siphon, and pressurized siphons are very unique animals to design. And Dudek was able to show that they've got a lot of experience with that, and so that gives comfort to the district that they know what they're doing. Because when you design a siphon, you need to not only design it for current low flows, but also those peak flows, and they operate a little differently. So it's very complex, and we have seen sister agencies who have designed similar systems that don't function, and it's a really sticky mess. So we're really happy with that. So the hydraulic component of this project is a big part of their scope. So Mike's being very, very, very humble here, but he brings a lot of experience. And just so the board knows, Dudek has worked for the district in the past on several projects, and they've also worked with me on other projects and other agencies. So they have a really good reputation. They're locally represented here, and they bring a lot of expertise. There are, like Mike said, there's some public outreach components. There's also easement acquisition components that we have brought into their scope as optional. We're hoping to not use them, but we want that flexibility when we get into it, because there's alignment alternatives we're going to be looking at. What's the best alignment when it comes to easement acquisition, when it comes to environmental impact, when it comes to impacts to the public, traffic, et cetera, and looking at those cost alternatives. Obviously, we want the best cost, right, when it comes to the construction, but we also want the best operational ability for the district. So anyways, that's a lot of what they're bringing.
Got it. And can you highlight what the specific environmental concerns may be for this project?
The specific environment, well, there's some areas that are plants or habitat there's a couple of, I don't know the exact names right off the top of my head. I'm not the environmental person, the engineer. I have a whole environmental department for that. But my understanding, there's some specific areas of the easement there's a rare plant that's in those, and those are one thing we don't want to have to disturb if we can get away from that. And then there are some other habitats for some endangered species, birds, and other such things that we have to be careful with.
Got it. And then what does the community outreach piece of this look like?
I'm going to basically say that we want to, well, we want to make sure we're keeping the public informed all along. So we're going to work obviously with staff to determine what that is and how it's going to be. Things we've done in the past are websites to keep people up to date. You have your website, which we'll be putting information on. Probably get into some public hearings somewhere along the way and some public meetings for education. And especially as we get down towards the construction phase, we want to keep people informed on that. And as you move into construction, you want to also keep people informed on where things are happening and where they may have alternate routes they have to do. So it's a continuous thing from the beginning to the end, with that construction component being the most important, I think, from public access.
Got it. And construction slated 26, 27, is that what it is?
No, we're actually pushing this out to fiscal year 28, 29. We did that for budget reasons, just because it is a huge, we expect it to be in the $40 million. So we want to have that far enough out there that we can make those decisions. Again, get with Wes, what's the financing options? Do we want to accelerate? Do we want to push this off a year? You know, we want to have some options. So that's kind of where, that's when you look at the proposed budget that Wes is going to bring to you, it's scheduled in fiscal year 29. And then on the environmental component through the design, which Dudek is providing, there's the whole CEQA process that we have to go through. And then on the public outreach, you know, Mike's right. I think we do have a really good website. We show which capital, and you've seen Senior Engineer Ryan Morgan bring those quarterly updates to engineering equipment and into the end of the year, where we show all the capital projects listed. But because of the magnitude and the impact of this project, we probably are going to ask them to help do like a dedicated project website page. We've done in the past some interesting videos and things like that, whether we do these internal, which would be ideal, especially for cost saving, or whether we outsource that for flexibility. We'll have to sort of make those decisions when we get there, but we want to have those options.
Director Grosset, I was actually the project manager. I was lucky enough to be the project manager to replacement portion, about a mile of this pipe, coming from the Laurels neighborhood down into Rancho Carrillo which is Melrose. It stopped at Melrose. The community, Rancho Carrillo community, was heavily involved because it went through their trail system. Their HOA was also heavily involved, and they had, at the time, now this is 2006, they had several members of their community that were professionals that worked in the environmental field. They're actually, a lot of them were environmental consultants that worked for other companies, and they represented the HOA and commented on it. So we had multiple community outreach meetings, multiple meetings afterwards, and even the 3 to 5 years of maintenance and mitigation monitoring, in which the community was heavily involved. When we get into Melrose and Point Seda, the city of Carlsbad will be heavily involved in those sections. Obviously, I don't know where the final alternative alignment will be, but if it follows that alignment, and the city process and the planning process is also fairly heavily involved, and of course pavement restoration, traffic control, traffic impacts, because there are a major park and 3 schools along that corridor. You know, those are all things that are going to be consideration that's been rolled into that scope.
That when we look at the alignments that we're talking about, we're going to be trading off potentially being in the street versus being in the easements. And so that is a big part of the decision process, because once you get in the street, you're bothering the pedestrians. If you're in the other, you're bothering the environment, but also the trail system. So that's part of the PDR, is to make those decisions as we go forward, so that when we move into construction, we know where we're going.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, for your
Thank you.
answer.
So, real quick question though, you mentioned trenchless. What does that look like? I mean, that is less, it seems like a cost-saving measure as well as less disruptive. What is trenchless look
Trenchless
like?
technologies are basically, you don't trench. You either, in our case, we were doing a directional drill in this potential, because it's a long distance. You can do jack and bore, which is a smaller distance, where you push a pipe and take the dirt out of it as you go.
So there's no environmental impact to that?
There's not, if you do it right, there's not.
Right. Well, that's what I was wondering.
But I will tell you, you do need to go and talk to the environmental resource agencies.
I won't bring up the firm or the name of the agency, but there's a $2 million piece of equipment sitting under a river somewhere I won't tell you about, that.
That you have access to?
No, they didn't, this wasn't our firm, it's another firm. But they did not go and talk to the regional resource agencies because they felt they weren't going to have a problem. And when they got it stuck, they went to the resource agency and they said, we need to go in and get this. And they went, I don't think so. And so you need to coordinate, even though you're not going to have those things. And I like to say at our company, we have our complete environmental group, and they're going to be doing a lot of the work on this project. We work with them to design around these problems. So that's the real benefit, is to not have those problems. And when you're going to not have the environmental impact, still talk to them so that in case there's an issue.
And that's cost saving, trenchless.
Cost savings, it's more expensive to build it, but it could be less expensive overall, and that's what we're figuring out in the PDR.
Yeah, all things being equal, trenchless is usually more expensive, but your savings may be on the environmental compliance side or the site restoration side, which makes that pencil out.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the soil
thank
conditions
you.
really drive a lot of those decisions. And that's what Dudek, they have a big geotechnical component to their scope, really, to evaluate that when they look at those alternatives.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just to summarize everything that we heard here, $3 million, 3 years, you're going to have everything you need to go in 28, 29 to build this for $40 million.
That's always the plan.
Nice.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for summarizing that. Appreciate that. Any other comments, questions? So, item 2.3, is there a motion to award professional services agreement? As presented?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Recommended by, or moved by Director Elithart. Second? I can second it. Second by Director Pennick. Bring it to a vote. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Moving on to an exciting pump zone charges. 2.4, pump zone charges. Any public speakers for this?
No, sir.
No.
So just to clarify today, the board is evaluating advertising for potential pump zone charges increase. Today at this board meeting, we're not looking at actually increasing pump zone charges. However, one of the things that I've talked in committee about is for consideration is there consensus among the board to look at pump zone charges, the timing of the pump zone charges, and the phasing of those pump zone charges. So those are considerations and direction staff is looking for in discussion. And with the action being, do we advertise for pump zone charges for consideration on the next board meeting, which is June 19th, or do we not? And that all depends on the timing and then also the phasing of how the board would elect to increase pump zone charges. So just to repeat myself, today we're really just looking at the timing, and the staff is really looking for direction on not only the timing for advertisement, but also the phasing of how pump zone charges will be considered. With that, I'll hand it over to our finance team, Mike and Wes.
Take it away.
Thank you, General Manager Campbell, Vice President Pennock, members of the board. The pump zones we brought to the P3 committee just this past Monday, and I think it was last week or the week before, we brought it to the finance committee. So we've presented this a couple of times. So just real quick, so General Manager talked about a fact sheet that we are planning to send out. So these are the headings that are on the fact sheet. Basically, what is a pump zone? So the pump zones are basically a distribution system that pumps water to higher elevations. There's currently 9 active pump zones within the district that affect approximately 3,000 customers. I'll get more into the numbers and statistics a little bit later. So why do property owners have to pay for the pump zones? So pumping water to higher elevations requires obviously more electricity. These additional costs are directly related to SDG&E charges. And public agencies typically pass through direct charges to those benefiting directly from these services. So currently, board policy, and I'll get into a little bit of the history too on the board policy, is set to recover 95% of the electricity costs only. So no maintenance, repair, replacement costs are included. If we did include all the maintenance, repair, and everything, the cost would probably be about 40 to 50% in addition to what I'm going to present in a minute. So what are some of the things that the district has done to mitigate the increases? So there's a couple of initiatives that have been taken. First of all, we did just recently the district-wide solar, which benefits all customers. So we also invested in some high-efficiency pumps and motors. And also, we're looking at pumping water during the off-peak times, so we're not using the higher pump zone, the higher electricity costs. So the other heading on there is, if approved, when would the pump zone rates be implemented? And again, that's up to the discretion of the board. But if the board does consider this on June 19th and approves it, the rates would then go into effect July 1st, 2024. So basically, a little history of background on this. Back in 2017, the board approved a 3-year increase in pump zone rates, and it's using what's called the weighted volume lift approach. So basically, you have different pump zones, and they start at different elevations and pump to a higher elevation. So I'll just break up an example. If the baseline is 200 feet and you need to pump to 800 feet, that's a 600-foot delta. So what we did is we combined all the pump zones, found out how much water is being pumped through them, the cost that it requires to pump that water, and just math, A divided by B comes to C, which is a cost per 100 acre foot of lift. 100 foot of lift, thank you. So the goal at the time was to achieve a 95% recovery for SDG&E costs, again, the energy costs only, by the end of that 3-year period. And as I mentioned, there's 9 active pump zones, there's 10 zones total with 3,000 customers. So rates were last updated about 5 years ago now, July of 2019. We did bring this discussion to the board and/or finance committee back in 2020 and 2022, but it was tabled at the time due to the COVID and the economic conditions that were going on at the time. So as I mentioned, our goal is to achieve 95% recovery. Currently, we're about half of that. We're recovering about 47.5% of the electricity only costs. Now I have a map on here. I know it's hard to read, but basically it's just to show the pump zone areas. So it's really mainly to the northwestern part of our district and then the southern portion of the district. In those colored sections, as I mentioned, there's 3,000 customers. The next slide will show. So here's the 10 pump zones. Again, there's only 9 active. The High Point doesn't have any customers in it currently. And it shows how many customers are, or how many meters are in each of those zones. The current rate that we're charged, and this is rate per unit of water, so the 748 gallons. And then the proposed rate. Basically, as I mentioned, we're at 47.5% recovery. We want to be at 95, that's double. So basically the rates would double all across the board to get to that 95%. So a little bit of history of the recovery method of recovery. Back in 2014-15, we were recovering about 55% of the electricity costs only. So what that meant, the 40% that we weren't recovering, again, we're only proposing to cover 95%. It was a delta or a shortage of about $124,000 at the time. It went on to the percentage recovery decreased to 35 and 36%. And then back in 2017, as I mentioned, that's when we came to the board and enacted a 3-year step method to try to recover 95%. I have another slide that shows why we didn't achieve that 95%, and I'll show you. So right now we're at about mid 40% recovery rate, and the last couple of fiscal years has been about a deficit of recovery of about $350,000. Now, what happens is because we're not recovering from the pump zone customers, when we set actual water rates, the amount of deficit is being absorbed by the other 19,000 customers within the district. So in the pump zones, there's been a decrease in demand in the pump zones, really across the district for the past 10 years due to conservation, drought, and rainfall. And the other factor on this is approximately a third of the SCG&E costs are fixed. So when you have lower demand over a fixed cost, that's going to increase the cost just by itself, even if SCG didn't even increase their rates, which they've almost in that 10-year period have over doubled. Their rates have over doubled, more than doubled. So I just showed you two charts, the electricity recovery percentage and, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't speak of this chart. This shows the demand. So the blue bars are the demand over the last 10 years. Back in 15-16, there was a decrease in demand because I believe that was when the governor's drought mandate came into effect, so most people conserved. And then 2 years later, the demand came right back up. But what also happened is during that time is people put in drought-resistant lawns or low-flow toilets, their low-flow shower heads. So there's been a lot of conservation that's pretty much permanent conservation. So as you can see, the demand has decreased over the last several years. And again, as I mentioned, with the fixed cost of SDG&E, the average cost per delivery has gone up. The red line shows the average use per customer within the pump zone. Back in 2014-15, the average was about 29 units of water. And now the average is about 20 units of water. So there's been about a 31% decrease in water. And that's what this slide will show. So these are just the two charts that I showed you before. Over that time period, SDG&E pumping costs per unit of water, the cost from SDG&E back in 2014-15 was about 30 cents per unit. Now it's about $1.02. So it's a 240% increase over that 10-year period.
So, sorry to interrupt, but are you averaging residential customers, agricultural customers, everybody lumped into one?
All customers within that pump zone, and I do have it broken out by pump zone in a little bit that I'll show you the cost per pump zone. And again, it is an average. The one thing also, and I'll reiterate this again when I get to that slide, is I don't want to confuse you when we talk about rates. I always talk about the average single-family residence is a 5/8-inch customer using 13 units of water. So here, when I'm talking about averages, I will specifically tell you what the averages are. It's not going to be that 13 units of water. What I did is I did analysis of all the pump zones, and I segregated each pump zone to get the average use for each pump zone and the average cost for each pump zone. The last presentations I did to the Finance Committee and to the P3 Committee had it just lumped into one. I thought it was best to pull them out. I do have an overall aggregate average that I'll show you, but I also have by pump zone.
And this is important for consideration because several of the pump zones, the characteristics are pretty uniform. This, one pump zone, it's primarily ag and large properties. Other pump zones, it's primarily tract homes. So that makes a big difference. The dollar amount makes a big difference, and also the percentages make a big difference, but the total dollar amounts are different because obviously tract homes will use significantly less water normally than big ag or larger lots.
Thank you.
So the demand, as I mentioned, has gone from 29 units of water to about 20 units of water now, a 31% decrease. So here's the pump zone. Again, I showed you the chart, the left portion of the chart I showed a couple slides ago. And here's where I segregated out per pump zone. And I only want to show the first one right now just so I can walk you through it. So in pump zone 1, the North Twin Oaks, there's about 134 meters in there. The current pump zone rate is 32%. To achieve the 95% recovery of electricity only cost, the rate would go up to about 64 cents. The average customer, and I don't have this on there. Yes.
That 64 cent, is that per unit?
Per unit of water, yes. And I didn't want to put too many numbers up there, but for North Twin Oaks, the average customer uses 52 units of water.
62?
52.
52.
So when I looked to get to that $16.78, it's basically the 52 units of water times the delta in the proposed and the current rates, so 32 cents. That comes at $16.78. To get to the average increase at 3.42%, I figured out what their total bill would be if they used, it's 52.4, but if they used the 52 units of water and took the 1678, which is their increase for that specific zone, and divided it by their specific average bill. Now again, sometimes when you use averages, right, it's hard to use averages, but it's easy to use averages. it's easy because it is the average. The part that I'm concerned about is that not everyone's gonna see the same results, right? Depends on each individual characteristic of that user. Someone might only use 10 units of water, whereas someone else is using 100, and you come to the average of, 55. So everyone's results will vary, but I thought that by taking the average for each zone, it was a little clearer than taking the average of all 3,000 customers. So the next slide, it's gonna pull everybody in, but I just wanted to show that we meticulously went through each zone to take the average. And then the overall average is the bottom line down here. The overall average for the 3,000 customers would be about a $9.53 increase, or 4.9%. And I have another slide next that I'll go over that.
Yeah, so just spending a little bit of time on this slide, because I think it's important. You can see the demographic difference between the type of customer use. So like Meadowlark, for example, is a hydrodynamic, so it's a very small lift. So it already gets water at a high elevation, and it's only lifting it just a little bit. So there's proper fire sprinklers and fire protection for that area. And you're looking at 11 cents increase, and based on their usage, you can see it's a $1.18 increase. But then you look at Coogan area, which has farmers in it.
Where's Coogan?
Coogan is in the very north of our district, up in the Miriam Mountains area. That area where the Newlands.
Even north of Twin Oaks?
Yeah, and if you look at it, there's only 31 customers, and some of them are commercial ag. So you're looking at a $48 increase for them, and you can see the percentage. So we thought it was important not only to see the dollar, but the percentage based on what they're seeing. And so as just to kind of reinforce what Mike was saying, within the zone, depending on the use, because you could have a single-family house in Coogan that uses very little water, and they're not going to see any significant increase, but you can see a farmer that uses a lot of water that's going to see more. Not only are the zones, users may experience different based on their use, but also the different zones themselves have completely different characteristics. And the lift difference in the price is because the amount of elevation that's being pumped, where to get the water from compared to how many 100 feet that water is being pumped in the air.
So is Wolf Emerald Heights?
Wolf area is basically off the freeway, off the 15 freeway, south of Deer Springs, up in the hills, kind of above Golden Door. Above the Golden Door.
So, Mike, what's an average bill in Coogan?
In Coogan? Okay, yes, I do have that. So the average bill in Coogan is $591.66. And their average, most of these zones are 3/4, 5/8 inch meters, the average. In Coogan, it's a 1.5 inch meter.
Thanks.
So it'd go from 600 to 650?
Yes.
Is that what we're looking at? Just
591 to 640, yeah. So I wanted to go over how, again, this is now the average that I'll show you, and just to kind of reiterate how we calculated it. So currently, the average of all 3,000 customers is about $195. The proposed increase, as I mentioned, was $9.53. So it would bring that bill from $194 to $204. Again, the $9.53 increase, 4.9%. I also did the middle column here. I did if the board wanted to elect to do it over a 2-year phase-in period, which is not the staff recommended, but I just wanted to give you an option. It would be basically half of the increase, so $477 this year, or 2.4%. The issue, one issue with that is the second year increase wouldn't be the delta, wouldn't be another $477. It'd be $477 plus the increase from SDG&E that's being passed forward. And I don't know what that amount is right now. Normally we get the increases sometime around now, April, May, June. So I wouldn't know that until April, May, June of next year. I'm kind of skip ahead that we would then try to coordinate this with the budget in future years. So we would know that amount by the time we brought it back to the board.
Yeah. SDG&E typically sends a rate increase notice in late spring, April, May, and it's usually, I don't know if they start in June, but I believe they started before July. So every year we'd be either a month or 2 months if we were to adopt something behind on the rates, but it's only a month or two.
So I talked about the average for the 3,000 customers, but as I mentioned, by pump zone, the average increase range from each of the pump zones, and this was on the other slide, is a little under 1% to 8.2%. And again, if you did it over a 2-year phase-in period, it'd be, 0.5% to 4.1. And obviously, no change is no change. So with a full phase-in, the revenues would recover 95% of the SCG&E costs in fiscal year 24-25. With a 2-year phase-in, obviously, revenues, well, at that point, revenues would cover about 71% of the SCG&E costs. So it'd be a deficit of about $172,000 in year one. So if no change to the pump zone rates, revenues would still only recover about that 47%. And the SCG&E cost deficit would be about $344,000 and growing. So just quickly, some of the pros and cons of the timing of the issue. With doing a full phase-in, we would recover the 95% of electricity costs in fiscal year 25. And then we would put a system in place to index the future increases, again, timing with the budget to whatever SDG&E passes through. So if they come in with an 8%, kind of like we do the ENR for cap fees. So it'd be basically a rate that we would just pass through. If we did over a 2-year, we would recover 95% in the second year, and we'd still have that system in place for future fiscal years. The one con is that it just leaves a gap of $172,000 in the next fiscal year 25. And if we did nothing right now, we would temporarily delay the increases to the 3,000 pump zone customers. Again, that would have to be absorbed then through the other 19,000 customers. But some of the cons of that is there's an inequity between customers. Right now, we know we're short in those pump zones. So if John Smith moves out today and Sally Jones moves in tomorrow, she's going to start having to recoup and pay for some of the things that are shorted from John Smith or John Jones or whatever I used. There'll also be an increase, a disparity between the revenues and expenses. As I told you, right now it's about $350,000, and that would just grow. There would be some potential Prop 218 issues because right now, whatever shortfall there is would have to be recouped through all 22,000 customers. And there's a potential for bigger customer increases because as we delay, as you know, SDG&E rates are not going to go down. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
Well, Mike, as always, thank you for a great presentation. You are definitely a number cruncher, and I appreciate it. And so the recommendation, let me just read it before we get in comments, on the table is authorize staff to send an outreach letter to all affected customers within the pump zone areas and to come back to the board June 19th to adopt new rates that would be effective July 1st.
Correct.
So this is mainly approving that outreach letter and then follow up, and then talking about timing at that time, it sounds like, correct?
Yeah, obviously from a
So we don't have
staff
to decide
standpoint.
timing today, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, you don't have to decide timing today, but obviously from a staff standpoint, if there's a discussion on timing that, and there's a board consensus on timing that may change the outreach schedule, the staff would like to know that, because sending out outreach now and then delaying that timing, it wouldn't be productive.
Okay. With all that information, any comment, any discussion amongst the board? Or do I have a recommendation?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
I'll second that.
Any comment, discussion?
I have a couple of questions, I suppose, before we move forward with the vote. First of all, this was voted on in 2017, and it's been not acted upon for 7 years and then a decade of shortfall. So from a customer's point of view, I would say you're being arbitrary in the way in which this is being enforced. So I'm concerned how that looks, and I'm curious for Mr. Gilpin's opinion here. And then B, there's a talk of a increase down the line for rates in general. So these customers will face an increase next month and then an increase in the near future, which also to me strikes as unfair. So, I'd like Mr. Gilpin's opinion on the enforcement of this to begin with, and then B, if it's been going on for a decade, why not just wait until everyone's prices go up? If they do.
So I appreciate that. And my understanding, mainly, this is just a pass-through. We're not like
Correct.
charging, like you said, maintenance, upkeep, things like that, pass-through rates,
95%.
whatever SDG&E rates went up, our rates are going up, we're passing through to the customer. Is that basic? Okay. But no, good question, and I don't know. He's brought two to you that are like,
I'll let you take A and I'll take B.
I'll let you take B first. I think in general, you've been undercharging your customers, forcing the district essentially to absorb the cost out of its reserves. And so you're just trying to true up the cost of service. I can't speak to why the board has elected not to do that since 2017, but generally it's a no-win game if you're going to continually charge less than it's costing you to provide service at some point.
I guess I'm wondering, why is board's direction even needed on this? Why can't it just be enforced, and why couldn't you go back and ask for all funds since 2017 if it was approved?
Well, the board authorized a rate increase over a 3-year period in 2017.
2019 was the best.
Yeah, 2017, 2018, 2019, over that 3-year period. The board did not authorize a direct pass-through to keep up with SDG&E charges, and the SDG charges continue to rise. After that, the staff did bring back for board consideration in 2020 and 2022 to try and make up that 95%. So history from 2017 to now is pretty clear. History from prior to 2017 is a little bit fuzzier, because the pump zone policy that the board had was 100% recovery before that, and as the graph shows, it never amounted to that 100%. However, the total dollar amounts were significantly less in the 100s and low 200,000s, because the SDG&E rates were also significantly cheaper. So as the rates compounded, that gap became bigger and became more of a burden on the budget itself, while before it really wasn't considered. That's the only explanation I have prior to 2017, and that explanation, it may not be 100% accurate, because I can't speak to what the board's thoughts were back then, and unfortunately, even though I was here, I wasn't part of those processes. But from 2017 on, the intent was to keep up, and when staff realized it wasn't there, that's when the attempt was made in 2020 and again in 2022. However, like most boards, the prudent decision was to hold off due to the pandemic. And that is true for many agencies across the board, for many rates, including County Water Authority. As far as answering portions of B, Director Grissett, you are correct. Staff doesn't know the exact rate increase coming from the Water Authority. We should know it here pretty soon, I'm hoping. And once we have to figure that out, we'll have to put that in our financial models, and we'll be rolling forward with a recommendation for a new 218, probably early next calendar year. Call it early spring to late spring. We'll be coming back to the board for consideration. Right now, the numbers aren't clear. We've heard numbers from the Water Authority as high as 19%. But we don't know where they're going to land. That will be a consideration, and you're absolutely right. Then pump zone customers may see a pump zone increase to them as early, based on board preference, as this July, and then as early as next July, all ratepayers, depending on what the board direction is, may see an increase due to the Water Authority pass-through and new 218 process. The other option would be obviously to delay pump zone increases, as you suggested, to next fiscal year. Then the pump zone customers would still see an increase at that time. At the same time, as rate increases, so they'd still see that too, instead of one then one. There's valid arguments on both ways, which is better. I cannot speak to which one I would prefer as a customer, but either way, you're looking at two potential rate increases over a course of roughly a calendar year.
Yes, sir.
We had, the last time we did this, boy, there was a passionate group of ratepayers, agricultural ratepayers that are just, heart-wrenching. But they know when they purchase these properties that these pump charges were in addition to their water. I believe it's unfair to have the rest of the ratepayers carrying $363,000, and to finally get back to the 95% is essential. And so I'm hoping we'll do this in one fell swoop, and that's a statement.
Thank you for the statement. Appreciate it. A follow-up to that.
So if it reaches 95% in July, you immediately turn on this billing. What adjustment does that make to all ratepayers who have been bearing this cost? Do their bills go down?
No, because right now we are still not collecting, because of the Prop 218, we're still not collecting the full rate that we should be from customers on regular rates.
What it will do is when our new 218 is considered, we won't be carrying that burden in, and it will make that difference in the revenue requirement of our new rates that the board will be, with the new 218 that the board will consider. So immediately, no, but indirectly, yes, on future rate increases.
Asked and answered?
Asked and answered, thank you.
And my concern is, most of these larger customers are in my district, and so I'm empathetic towards these farmers, and I know some of them out there, and it is hard, but, it's a pass-through, and it's like it is, it's jeopardizing the, fiscal solvency of our district. So after that discussion, do we still have a motion by Director Elitharp and a second by Director Hernandez? Okay. Any other discussion? So we have again, we have a motion by Director Elitharp, second by Director Hernandez. Take it to a vote. So 3 in the favor, yes, 1 abstaining, Director Grosset, and it passes. Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on, we're moving right along here. 2.5, Vallecitos Water District recommended fiscal year. Where are we at here? Recommended fiscal year, the budget 2024. We haven't heard this before. Is it? We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? We don't have a second. You got to go.
We got to do a party page first.
There we go. There we got one of those left. So turn this over to.
So, sorry.
He did catch you.
Making me break character here. So our finance manager is going to be presenting our budget. The board and committees have seen it many times. I will encourage the finance manager to, our chief financial officer to be brief and exercise brevity in his presentation.
Thank you.
And that I can
and with
do,
that?
'cause we've done this 5 times, so I actually watched my last year's presentation, and I spoke really fast through the whole thing, so I was like, I can do that again. It'll just be like playing it in 1.5 speed if you want me to do that. But good evening, Vice President Penick, members of the board. This is, hopefully one of the last presentations of the board, the budget for 2025. Budget party page for the new year here, and then we'll go on to the agenda. This presentation is going to be almost identical to the one you saw last time, so I will go through it as fast as possible, but I'm always open to questions if you have them, so stop me as I speed through it. The agenda, budget process and calendar will be talked about first, then we'll go over operating revenues and expenses for water and sewer. I'll talk about salaries and benefits, then the capital budget. After that, we'll go into the reserve balances, and finally, staff's recommendation. So here's the abbreviated budget process and calendar with everything, so I'm not bringing everything in. And today, we're actually here to approve the recommended budget, hopefully, and it'll be the last meeting of 5 months' worth of work and 5 committee and budget meetings and presentations. So there's our guy crossing the finish line. He has a happy face on. You couldn't see it, but he was happy. This is page 2 of the recommended budget, and this will be sort of our home page. I'm going to go through this. In the top part of the reserve-funded portions of the budget, that's the capital, the debt service, and the vehicles and equipment. First, I'm going to focus on the operating portions, and I'll talk about water operations first. And here is page 10 of the recommended budget, and this is the water operating expense portion. And we can see that $14 million is made up of $9 million in operations and maintenance, $3.4 million in G&A, and $1.9 million of engineering costs. But by far the largest portion of the water operating expense budget are water purchases at 73%. And we've talked about this over and over again, but we can't hit on enough. 73% of our costs come from purchasing water. So when water rates go up, our costs go up, and we have to pass that on. So looking at the assumptions that we've put in to the recommended budget from the Water Authority, we have an increase of 20% included. That was the latest, most likely scenario that we had. There has been some discussion recently about an 18.5%, possibly 19% increase, but it's still discussion. So it's most likely we're going to stick with 20% to be conservative. If they do go 18%, more than likely they'll just push that out to future years anyway. So this 20% was determined to be the best case, or most conservative way to go. Our water increase assumptions, we have, since our Prop 218 limits us to 6.5%, we've included that in the budget because we're going to need at least that, if not more, as we'll show. And if we were able to get the full amount, so if we were actually able to raise rates by 20% or in line with what we need, it's not actually 20%, I'll show that, we would actually collect $5.7 million more in revenue. So with the 6.5, we're going to have about a $5.7 million revenue shortfall this calendar, starting in January, or next fiscal year.
Can we, is 6.5% pass-through, is that something that's put on us, or is that something we imposed ourselves?
So we did a 5-year Prop 218 notice, and with that, we imposed it upon ourselves.
So on the next 218, we could change that?
Correct, and that's the plan.
Yep.
Very good, thank you.
So, moving back over. This next slide shows our water purchases as a percentage of our total operating budget. And you've seen it before, and we're around 73%, and that amount is only increasing, especially with the water rates from the Water Authority increasing. It'll be up to about 75% by 2029. So this is not something that's going to change in the near future. It's actually only going to be a increase. Next, just to kind of put this in perspective, we keep saying it's 73%, 73%. What does that mean for our budget and how we apply it? You can see here, purchased water 73%. Electricity costs are about 3.2% of our overall operating budget, and the rest of our operations are at 24%. So this year's budget, for example, we have a 20% increase in purchased water. Electricity is budgeted to go up by 6%, and overall other operating costs are budgeted to go up by only 4%. So looking at that, purchased water by itself, when 72% of your costs go up by 20%, you're going to need at least a 14.6% increase to your rates. Electricity goes up by 6%, it's 0.19%, so it has a pretty minimal impact on our overall budget. And our operating costs, which we kept to 4%, actually only have less than a 1% total impact on the budget itself. We're keeping those as low as we can, but it's only 24% of the budget, so it only has a 1% impact. In total, we need about 16% rate increase, and as we've mentioned, we're only passing along a 6.5% increase. And the major majority of that is the 14.6% coming from the Water Authority. So next, we'll take a look at water sales. Water sales are budgeted to be $32.1 million. Ready to serve is budgeted at $16.2, and pumping costs are budgeted at $650,000. These are just a sensitivity analysis. If we're off on our demand calculations, if demand's 10% lower than we anticipate, then we will actually have to draw down reserves by about $1.2 million. If it happens to be 10% higher, I don't want to make Chris, but I'm kind of hoping it might be. We actually will have a $1.3 million transfer to reserves. So that's the sensitivity, so you can see there if we're off 10% either way. Next is the budgeted actual water sales. You can see that our highest cost, or sorry, water purchases, highest cost by far from desal water costs at, $3,800 per acre foot, but we are contractually obligated to purchase 3,500 acre feet in desal water. We are also contractually obligated to purchase from OMWD, and our total acre feet purchase or budgeted purchases for the year is 13,590 for a total cost of $39,631,000.
So sorry to interrupt, I know we've talked about this before, our contractual obligation to purchase from DSAL, can we resell that if we have a seller? We have to use it
Yeah, we don't have the rights to sell.
to
the
resell?
water. Yeah.
Good, all right, thanks.
So back to the homepage, next we're gonna talk about sewer operations. $17.4 million or 14% of the total overall budget. And this is from page 20 of the recommended budget. It's just a summary of the wastewater operating expense budget. And we can see here that by far our largest expense is for treatment with Encina and the Metal Arc plant at 48% or $8.4 million. So now that we've talked about the operating expenses, I kind of wanted to, again, put it in perspective, trying to show how we're doing more with less and how we're holding our controllable costs in line. And this is the 5-year history of our operating cost increases. And you can see over the last 5 years, we've held operating costs from 1.5% up to 5.95, and the 5-year average is 4.1% increase for our operating costs. So we've really held our operating costs in line. Something to be proud of. And if you expand that to 10 years, it's 3.9%. So overall, we've kept our operating costs at 3.9% over the last 10 years on average.
And just to kind of put a perspective on that, that's through COVID, that's through commodity increases, gas, oil increases. That this is an all-in number for us, for our internal controllable operation costs.
So next we'll talk about sewer revenue. Sewer revenue is pretty steady. There are no rate increases budgeted for sewer this year. So sewer service charges are budgeted at $19.1 million. Reclaimed water sales, which are actually to Carlsbad and Leeuwenhoek, so those are all basically our costs are recovered from those two agencies, are $3.7 million. And other revenues are at $282,000 budgeted for fiscal year 2025. Now, salaries and benefits. Here's the salaries and benefits budget for actual for the last 5 years. And we can see salaries at the bottom, benefits at the top. And we've kept salaries and benefits very steady over the last 5 and even 10 years if you keep going back. And our budgeting has been pretty good. Last year we were a little bit low, but we were short-staffed. So we came in under budget, which is better than over budget. And we can see here that it's actually, salaries are budgeted to increase this year by about $1.3 million, which is about 7%. And that's due directly to the COVID, or the COLA of 5% this year, as well as increases in PERS of about $432,000. So next, I want to show over the last 10 years or so, these are the authorized positions of the district. And in 2016, you can see we had 115.25 authorized positions. That amount's come down to 109.75 over the last 10 years. So we've reduced the number of positions that we have. Meanwhile, we are growing. The number of connections is growing. Our services required are growing. The number of pipeline lengths are growing. Everything is growing. So here we can see the number of connections has gone up about 2,000 over the last 10 years. Meanwhile, the number of employees has gone down. So our number of employees per 1,000 connections has gone down from 2.75 down to 2.52. And as we saw in the previous presentation, we were ranked second lowest amongst all the agencies we surveyed as far as number of employees per 1,000 connections. So our number, we're doing less with more.
Why?
More with less, the other way around.
I mean, why? What do you attribute that to? I mean, is it technology or?
It's a combination of a lot of things. First off, we're very light on administration. We've repurposed a lot of positions for higher level positions to produce work, and we have very little administrative support. So a lot of even the managers, a lot of people do their own admin work. At some point that becomes inefficient, and I don't know if we're there yet. The other thing is we scrutinize every position before we refill them, and we look at technology and other type of ways to get the work done. So we're kind of trying to work smarter, not harder in a lot of places. What's been hard on the other side of it is new regulations. New regulations create additional workload, and we try to find ways to fill those workloads with programs and technology, but it doesn't work all the time.
Thank you.
So next we'll talk about the capital budget. Capital budget for fiscal year 2025 is budgeted at $40.9 million. So that's the one-year budget that's being proposed tonight. We also do a 5-year and a 10-year capital plan, financial plan in general. But the 10-year capital plan is $226 million. So looking at the capital budget, fiscal year 2025 is what's being proposed tonight for recommended tonight for approval. And of the $40.9 million, $12.5 million are for water projects, and 28.4 are for sewer projects. Of the $28.4 million for sewer projects, $7.2 million are for projects at Encino Wastewater Authority. So then looking at the 5-year and 10-year plan, the 10-year plan is $226.2 million. Of that, $42.1 million are for water projects, and $184.1 million are for sewer projects. And then breaking down the sewer projects of 184.1, 151 are VWD projects, but $32.4 million of that 184 are for Encino Wastewater Authority projects. So that's just kind of to give you a breakdown of the 10-year CIP.
And for our board members that are represented on EWA, this does not include the EWA's energy resiliency plan or new permit restriction plans, which are not in the budget, are being proposed and being studied now.
And then moving on, the reserve levels projected for the next five years. We can see here, as we've mentioned before, the floor in the water reserves is 3 years of projected system replacement costs plus 6 months of operating expenses. And the ceiling is actually, oh, I went too far. Oh, I went back. There we go. And the ceiling is 10 years of projected system replacement costs plus 6 months of operating expenses. Our reserve levels projected are supposed to stay within the floor and the ceiling, and we can see in 2025 they will be at $37 million, and by 2029 they're projected to be back at $37 million. That's just a coincidence. But they are above the floor and within policy limits. So that's the 5-year projection for water reserves. And then looking at sewer reserves, similar situation. The floor is exactly the same as for water, but the ceiling is 8 years of projected system replacement costs plus 6 months of operating expenses. And our projected reserve balances for sewer are $55 million in 2025, and by 2029 they will be $55 million. It happened again. It is coincidence, I swear to God. But they're above the floor and within policy limits. So our reserves will be healthy per our financial plan. The sewer, it's important to mention that the wastewater reserve projections include 2 debt issuance assumptions, but both of them are capacity fee related, so they will not affect sewer rates. They'll be part of the capacity fee discussions later on if we develop a new model or include it in the existing capacity fee plan. So then moving on, days in cash, which is another important thing, and I did mention we're actually being surveyed by Fitch right now, so I have to get this information over them as soon as I'm done with the budget itself. So they'll be looking at this, they'll be looking at reserve levels, so we're sending it all over to them. But here are the days in cash, and we can see the orange line actually represents the median historically for AA+ agencies and basically it's not retail, yeah, it's retail industry. And then as far as 2025, it goes up to 665 because that's for the AAA rated agencies. But in 2025, our days in cash are projected to be 455 days. And by 2029, it'll be 354 days. We've actually had discussions with Fitch and done 6 surveillances over the last 6 or 8 years. And that amount of days in cash combined with our other factors actually should be sufficient to maintain our credit rating. And speaking of credit ratings, well, first, let's go into the spike here. So you'll see in 2021-22, it actually went up to 713 and 703 days. That was because of the debt issuance that we had in 2021. So we had an immediate cash infusion from that debt issuance that basically spiked our days in cash because we were able to go back 3 years and recover costs of capital projects for 3 years back. But then it came down according to our plan. And then, talking about our rating, in 2013, we were upgraded to a AA+. And we've been able to maintain that rating over the last almost 10 years. But then, good news, in 2024, we were upgraded to a AAA rating. And we hope to maintain that for, well, hopefully for the rest of for as long as we can. And then with that, staff recommends adoption of the fiscal year 2025 recommended budget. And I got to get my guy at the finish line there. He's almost there.
Almost there. Wes, to thank you and your team, everybody for your blood, sweat, tears, erasers, pencils, whatever you use. Thank you, and everybody that's worked with you, appreciate it. Because I know this has been a long process. There's been a motion, no. Any questions, comments, concerns, discussion?
Yeah, could you go back to the water reserve graph?
Yep. There you go.
Does this reflect the $5.7 million shortfall?
It does.
Due to the pass-through limitation?
Yep.
Okay.
Good question, thank you.
And that's that big dip,
Yep.
And
After-
just, sorry.
after the 49 or 49 million, that dip.
Right, this year to next year.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're actually projecting losses or drawdowns of reserve. I think it's for the next 2 or 3 years, and then we finally get back to positive after that.
Yeah, and that does include, an assumption that there will be a new 218, some rate recovery
Yeah.
within there.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Wes, Mike, Jody, for putting this on. This has been, I think, our 7th time seeing it. Director Elitharp, thank you so much for leading the Finance Committee. And it's really a feat, and so thank you for that. And I just want to note that if we didn't buy the desal water, we would be the cheapest water in the land. But I'm happy we do buy the desal water. It's very tasty water and very environmentally sound stuff. So just thank you all.
Thank you. Anything else? Do we have a motion to approve the budget as presented?
I shall motion that, yes.
Motion by Director Grosset,
I'll second that.
second by Director Elitharp. Take it to a vote. And I'm guessing, I'm going to see 4 greens here. Hey! Take it to the finish line. We got, motion passes 4-0. Thank you and congratulations.
Do I do that right in the speaker?
Yeah, that's all right.
Thank you, Finance
you.
team, for all your work, and thank you, Finance Committee, for all your work getting us there, so.
And on to the audit of that budget.
Yes, now, moving on in our agenda here to 2.6, a resolution declaring intent to reimburse certain expenditures with one or more issuances of tax exempt obligations.
Yeah, this is part of our normal process with the budget approval. It's kind of a standard thing that allows us to utilize expenditures for future debt service. This is not an issuance of debt, not a commitment of debt. I'll have Wes do a brief presentation to explain that, then ask for board recommendation.
And General Manager Gumpel covered most of it already. It's pretty much in conjunction with the budget. The CIP projects we have listed in the back of the budget, this just makes them eligible for future reimbursement from debt. So if we issue debt going forward, we can actually go back 3 years and cover costs as long as we do these inducement resolutions every year to cover our projects. If we don't do them, we don't have the ability to do the retroactive reimbursement. So we do it annually with the budget to make sure that we're covered in case we go forward and we decide we need a debt issuance to finance some of these projects.
Is there any limitations on that, or as far as dollar amounts or anything?
No, it's qualifications of projects and things. So if you're issuing debt for 20 years or 30 years, usually the project has to be a 20-year, 30-year asset that it creates. Things like that happen. But overall, you select them all and say they're all eligible, and then when you go issue the debt, you can go through that process.
Gotcha. Okay. As presented, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
I can second that. Motion by Director Hernandez, seconded by myself, Director Pennick. Take it to a vote. Resolution passes 4-0. Thank you so much. Wish all the action items were that quick. 2.7, where are we at here? Turn to my page. Pension funding policies for CalPERS unfunded accrued liability.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President Pennick. This again will continue the finance show. That's the second half of our board meeting today. So Wes, why don't you take this one away?
When it rains, it pours. It's a finance show tonight. We got a lot of items on the agenda. We brought this one, actually briefly talked about it at the board meeting on, I think it was May 15th. And we brought it to the Finance Committee last week to talk about. So this is the pension funding policy. It's kind of in conjunction with the budget as well because it's included as a payment or assumption in the budget. But I want to give the board some background information on the policy itself and answer any questions you might have. So with that,
Just to give a little bit of history, you probably know that the district is part of a pooled group plan, and we have two types of members or defined benefits in those plans. The classic employees and the PEPRA employees. The Public Employment Pension Refund Act happened in January 1st of 2013, where they basically reduced the benefits of some of the employees. I'm glad I started before that date. But we had those two types of employees, and then we basically give our funds to CalPERS, and they invest it in order to meet their pension obligations and our pension obligations. They have an expected rate of return that they have to achieve to do that, and that's 6.8% currently. If they don't meet those rates of return, then we are responsible to pay the shortfalls. And those shortfalls are paid in the form of a liability. So they tell us, we didn't make our obligation, or we didn't make our expected rate of return, you now owe us this amount of money, and then you have to pay us back that amount of money at 6.8% interest. Because if we had it, we'd be investing it, and we are expecting to earn 6.8% interest. So every time they don't meet that, we have liabilities. That's called an unfunded accrued liability. So, just to give a little history about how CalPERS is done with their returns, this is back to 2002, so we have about 22 years of returns. The orange is their actual returns, are their actual returns. The blue line reflects their expected. It has changed, it's gone down from 7.5 down to 6.8 over the years. The red line actually means no return, so 0. So over 22 years, they've actually only had losses 4 times, which isn't too bad, I think. Most of it goes in line with depressions or recessions. And then here, this is really important, their 20-year averages. 20-year average is actually 7.6%, and their target was 7.4, so they've made their 20-year average. Their 10-year was 7.3 returns, and they had a target of 7.2, so overall they've accomplished that as well. Over the last 5 years, they're a little bit below, but they're still doing well with returns of 6.4%. So CalPERS is doing well with their investments. They've got good strategies. I feel comfortable giving them, paying them our funds because they're investing and earning 6.4%. I don't see any sort of issues or red flags there with giving CalPERS our money. And this is a long history that kind of lends to that. So looking at the district's policy and funding our unfunded accrued liability, which I mentioned is a 6.8% debt and would be our most expensive debt that we have at the district. Our policy says that we will pay the minimum amount to avoid negative amortization, and I'll get more into negative amortization. I know you're excited to hear that just by the term, about what that is in a minute. But then we will also prepay it. So we get a bill every year at the beginning of the year on July 1st, and they say if you pay it by July 31st, we'll give you a discount, so you save all your interest. If you pay it monthly, you have to pay that interest. So we save about $30,000 a year by prepaying that amount that's the minimum required payment. And third, we will maintain a funded target ratio range of 85 to 100%. That allows us to minimize this expensive debt, so that we keep that to a minimum. And then the procedures for doing that are if we're within the range, we will pay the minimum to avoid the negative amortization again, so not just the minimum required, but the minimum to avoid negative amortization. If we are above the range, we'll just pay the required minimum, which would mean we're above 100%, so the required minimum should be 0. And then if we're below the range, we'll pay an amount sufficient to restore us to within the range. And there's sort of a caveat to that in D, which we actually was a suggestion of Director Grosset at the Finance Committee meeting, and a good one, I believe, because we've added it to it. If we fall below, if the district should fall below 70% funded, that amount will be brought to the board to discuss how much we would need to pay to get back within range, and the payment would be at the board's discretion at that point. That just keeps us from sending millions of dollars to PERS or sending it to them and then having them invest it, and then we get a swing and we become super funded after that as well. So good suggestion, and now part of the policy. So I promised I'd talk about negative amortization, so here we go. So here's what our debt looks like. Luckily, it's been simplified. Here's the actual liability. This is the 2 times, 22 is the 1 year they fell short. They gave us a restart. So you can see that we have a total liability of $15.1 million. The biggest portion of that is this partial fresh start of $13.5 million. It's amortized over 20 years, so it's like a $13.5 million loan over 20 years at 6.8%. The minimum required payment on that is $289,000. And I say that, and I don't know, hopefully you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. That seems awful low for a payment on a $13.5 million loan over 20 years. The reason for that is because PERS has tried to make it affordable for cities and agencies, and they're only requiring us to pay 20% of the total amount that actually needs to be paid to pay it off over 20 years. The rest of it, the other 80%, becomes negative amortization or an additional liability to the district. So you can see how this could be a whole, it's like a credit card debt that you're never going to pay off. So our policy is stating that we're going to pay 100%, not 20%. That's what the policy means when it says pay the minimum to avoid negative amortization. So to take a look at that too, they also provide you with what you should pay if you want to pay it off over 20 years. So this is straight from the PERS actuarial evaluation. It's on page 15. And they say if you wanted to pay it off over 20 years, you'd have to pay $1.4 million. So we're only requiring you to pay $289,000, but you need to pay 1.4 if you want to pay it off over 20 years. So what that equates to is $921,000 of negative amortization if you only make the minimum required payment. So that's just illustrating what we mean by negative amortization, and that we're not going to do that, assuming the policy is approved by the board. Next, I want to show the funding levels of the district. So this is the 10-year history of the funding levels of both of our plans, the Classic and the PEPRA. And most importantly, we can see that currently both of our plans are within the funded target range of 85 to 100%. So this year's budget includes a payment of just the minimum amount plus any amount to avoid negative amortization. That's about $1.4 million, as you just saw. That's included in the budget that was just approved by the board. So in conclusion, this is our most expensive debt by far, and it is fiscally responsible and important that we pay off as much of it as we can when we can afford to. And this policy will actually promote efficient financial management and risk because we know what to bring to the board and propose for payments for the PERS funding. And it minimizes the impacts on ratepayers because it reduces the amount of interest that the district has to pay, and it affects our rates and keeps us from getting into negative amortization. It supports good bond ratings when they see that we have a plan to address our most expensive debt. It's important to them, and it raises our ratings. It helps when we only have 354 days in cash. And it ensures we pay our pension benefits. So that's important to a lot of us here as well. So these are the important things of the plan, of the policy. And with that, staff recommends the adoption of the pension funding policy.
Thank you. I had just one basic question. Do we have a policy now? Are we changing? Are we adding? Is this a new policy?
This is a new policy. So we had a policy in the past. In 2019, I believe it was, we, like many other agencies, said this is a serious debt, and I think it kind of came to light that there was this negative amortization. Before that, because I talked to PERS about it, and I talked to many actuaries, I went to conferences and talked to them trying to understand how this works, because if you read an actuarial evaluation, it's complicated. And they were like, I said, we were thinking about pre-funding our pension plan because we've got a $17 million unfunded accrued liability. And they said, well, just tell us what bases you want to pay and we'll take care of it for you. And I'm like, what's a base? I didn't know, they're using terms I had no idea. I'm like, why can't you just say liability and why can't you say, so it was a little bit complicated. Basically in 2019 it came to light and a lot of agencies said, we need to start pre-funding this and come up with a plan for it. So us and CENA and other agencies developed plans to pay it off. Our plan was to pay it off over 3 years at the time because we had $17 million. So we sent in $8 million the first year and we saved, I forgot what it was, I have all the numbers.
Large amount.
We saved over millions of dollars in interest that we saved by paying that $8 million. And then we sent another $4 million the following year, and we were still, so that would put us at 12, and we had a $17 million liability. But then PERS had astronomical returns of 22% the following year. That put us super funded, so we were at 100%, 105% funded after that. So we didn't send the third payment. So we had a 3-year funding policy to shorten it up for you after I just went that long-winded. So that policy is now expired, so now we're looking at the future and how we'll address it going forward, and we really think it's important to eliminate that negative amortization.
And we want to be sensitive to the fact that as PERS's returns swing up or down, our liabilities will also swing. So you don't want to be in a position where you're constantly super funded by trying to pay 100%, because at that point you're using ratepayer money and it's not providing any benefit. So we want to keep it in a manageable range.
Gotcha. So does this policy have an expiration date, or are we voting on, it's just an ongoing policy until changed?
Because this is something we'd be bringing to the board every year to discuss, and this kind of eliminates the need for most of that, assuming we're within the range, so we don't have to bring it and have full-on presentations about the pension, unless it falls below 70%, at which time we will. And I can't take full credit for establishing this policy. This is something that's been worked on by Encina actually had meetings with member agencies. We had several of them to discuss this and go over the policy, and we all worked together to establish their policy. And a lot of ours is directly from what, we worked on together for theirs.
Well, thank you for establishing a policy. Appreciate it. Any questions, discussion? Motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Director Hernandez,
Second.
second by Director Elizabeth. Bring it to a vote. Man, we're moving right along here. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. Last one. Is that right? Where are we at? 2.8?
Yes, sir.
2.8, resolution of the Board of Directors of the Vallecitos Water District electing to have sewer service fees for Improvement District A for fiscal year July 2024 to June 30, 2025, collected on the tax roll.
Yeah, just a quick clarification on this before I hand it over for the finance team's final item. This is also an annual item, much like the inducement resolution, and this is for our sewer-only customers. So this is sewer-only customers that we do not serve water, and we've traditionally collected our sewer fees through the tax roll. It's been ongoing since before I started here. So Wes, will you take it over from there?
Yeah.
The West Show.
Last item though, we're getting there. So this is an annual item, as General Manager Gumpel mentioned. This is for Sewer Improvement District A, which is a sort of special district where the Vallecitos district has sewer-only customers that are not our water customers. So we've elected historically to have them on the tax roll. They're water customers of other agencies such as VID and Rincon. We've elected historically to have them on the tax roll, and this action tonight actually just continues that. So we'll elect to do it again, as well as setting the public hearing for July 17th, at which time we'll bring the amounts to you. And at that meeting, we would actually discuss the collection. So that would be approval of collection. So it's a public hearing for those customers. So this is just approving the election to continue to do it and setting the public hearing for July 17th.
Okay. Any question, discussion, motion?
Move to approve.
Move to approve. Motion by Director Hernandez, seconded by?
Second.
Second by Director Grosset.
Thank you.
Vote. We got through with a 4-0, Wes. Good job. Thank you so much. Moving right along. Follow here. Everything's going good. We're 2 reports. End of action items done. General Manager.
Yes, Vice President Panic, I have a few items. There will be continuing work, night work on Palomar Airport Road down in Carlsbad. That's for our fail-safe project. Also, around the week of July 4th or after the week of July 4th, we'll be starting our lost postage repair job, and there's going to be opportunities for the board to do a field trip on that job, as it's pretty interesting construction going on underneath that triple box culvert. So we'll coordinate that with the board, and if you're available, obviously come out and meet at the district, borrow some hard hats and make sure you wear good shoes, and we'll take you out there for a site visit. Let's see, a couple other things. Oh, I don't want to forget this. So the board obviously have probably seen and already enjoyed the new mugs. So it's a continued thank you to both our whole public information team and Anthony for this, because these mugs will stay here. We'll wash them and we'll have them ready for board meetings and possibly committee meetings also. And it's an effort to not only reduce costs, because I didn't realize this, but that box water that we're drinking was almost $2 a box for water that is very expensive.
Was it desal?
It was way more expensive than desal.
I got you.
And so this not only saves the district water, but also is in the spirit of what Director Hernandez brought forward. It actually even further reduces waste, landfill waste. So, and as Director Grosset pointed out, we should be enjoying the product that we're peddling. So it's a support for our own system. There are, as you saw from the chart in Wes's, I don't know if you noticed, but when you looked at it, we have several vacancies. We have retirements. Some employees have moved on to promotions in other areas. So our Human Resources Department, led by Denise and Bridget, will be very busy. But also, we do have shortages, and almost every department has shortages of staff. So we're working through that processes, getting temps where necessary, but we'll also be looking at advertisements. So if you check our website, you'll see a lot of jobs available, and we hope to bring you a lot of new faces in the next couple quarters for introduction. Last thing for me is, we have a few agreements that will be coming your way, some long awaited agreements. One is a fire hydrant agreement with the city of Carlsbad, which got fairly contentious and may have even gone to closed session. I don't know about that, but it was fairly contentious for a while. We finally finalized that agreement. We're going to bring it to our board on the 19th, so this month. Carlsbad's bringing it to their city council on the 25th. And then we're in the process of working on a recycled water agreement. I'm hoping to bring it to our board in the second meeting in July. And as a last reminder, the first meeting in July is July 3rd, and we're going to cancel that meeting. It's right before the holidays, and many staff, including managers, including myself, will be on vacation. So.
Okay, thank you. Legal counsel?
Just a brief report. I appreciate the homework tonight. Just wanted to update you relative to Lake San Marcos. GM Gapel, myself, and Attorney Monette met earlier this week. We've laid out a game plan. We'll be coming back for a closed session workshop probably the end of July after GM Gapel has had a chance to communicate with regional board staff, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. County Water Authority.
Okay, the board met on May 23rd. Just a couple items of note. The board adopted a resolution setting the time and place for a public hearing on June 27th, 2024, to receive comments regarding the recommended rates and charges for calendar year 2025. So it should be an interesting meeting. A lot of behind-the-scenes discussions going on currently. The other item of note, the board authorized award of a construction contract to J.F. Shea Construction, Inc. in the amount of about $47.9 million for the Pipeline 5 relining San Luis Rey Canyon project. That's my report.
Thank you, Director Elizar. Encina? Any?
Yes, we met on May 22nd, and we approved the extension of member agency billing methodology. We also did a sole source design build authorization for heat dryer improvements, and then they went through Encina's procurement strategy. That was the meeting.
Thank you so much. Any standing committees?
Yeah, I had a couple. Engineering Equipment Committee met on May 28th. Items for discussion were the fiscal year 23-24 capital improvement program quarter 3 update. Second was the district headquarters ADA bathroom construction options. And third was an AMI pilot update. And then on May 30th, Finance Investment Committee met. Items for discussion, PERS policy, pump zones charges, and the annual audit update.
Sounds like you prepped this meeting.
Yes.
Thank
Yes, we did.
Appreciate it, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for running the meeting, Director Penick. The P3 committee met. We just also discussed the pump zone fact sheet, which was approved tonight. The Special District Leadership Foundation Awards and the continuance of receiving that distinction. New customer outreach and trying to affect a better first impression on our new customers. Board of Director information packet, which will be soon on the website, not only giving access to the public of how we learned our ways of the Jedi here, but also for future potential board members. And discuss the resolution to potentially voice a opposition to Initiative 1935 should it pass. That is
Good
it.
discussion. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other standing committees? Reports on meetings, conferences, seminars attended? Yes, sir.
Yes, we had a very interesting State of the City meeting with protesters and the whole 10 yards. City's in good shape. Protesters were finally removed, and we went on with the meeting. So it was a good meeting.
Yes, there was. Thank you. Anything else? Any reports? Yep.
I just wanted to say I attended the city as well. And so it was a great opportunity to network, and it seems like our city's healthy, and the protests brought me back to the early 70s when I was in high school, so, yeah.
The good old days.
Yeah.
Huh? That's good. Well, thank you. Any other director's comments or future agenda items? And with that, meeting adjourned at 7:10. Thank you.